This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. Hello and welcome to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. As promised in last week's episode, we are going to do a show all about unicorns and fairies. Woo! All right, not really, but we are talking about sidekicks, scene stealers, those great supporting characters who sometimes come out of nowhere to steal your readers' hearts. And oddly enough, we had planned this topic last time we recorded weeks ago, so it just worked out quite well. All right, so characters who surprise you and steal your heart. Non-protagonist. Does anyone want to start with an example of one?
I am Groot.
Oh, yes. Okay. And I have actually seen one of those movies. I think that I was like, Groot. I know Groot. Who's Groot?
About it for a while, yeah.
Yeah, but in case anyone isn't aware, who's Groot?
Groot is a sentient tree in the Guardians of the Galaxy series in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and variously comes in to save the day and does play a pretty big part in the plots, I guess. But is certainly a side character and a very lovable one, and one that only ever has really one line ever, except one exception. So he answers answers every question or joins in with just the words "I am Groot," but usually said in a different intonation. And in the movie, actually, is played by it's voiced over by Vin Diesel. And apparently, the rumor goes, I don't know if this is true, that they actually gave Vin Diesel what the words were meant to be behind the "I am Groot," so he knew what emotion to express. So if it was, there's no way I'm getting involved in that, then he would say, "I am Groot." So now, obviously, that's difficult in a novel because you don't have the same auditory intonations that are easy to write. But anyway, adorable character because of the fact that some of those different expressions were always related just through that one line of dialogue. So that's one of my examples. I have many.
Yeah, and let's go ahead and use that as a jumping off point for craft, because what you said about the dialogue is really interesting. It reminds me also of Chewbacca and Han Solo. So you've got the character who doesn't speak English but communicates vocally, and you need another character who can understand, right? And then you also need to supply enough context in the scene and in the other dialogue so that the reader gets a sense of what the, I am Groot or the Wookiee is actually meaning when they say I am Groot or howl or grunt or whatever, right? Yeah. Interesting.
And sometimes, they obviously the main character or the other character in that particular scene may have to say, "Yeah, I know, I don't like it either." So
right, a little bit of interpretation.
Yes, because otherwise it can get a little bit tricky. So
yeah.
But anyway, yes, that's a language issue, isn't it? But there's something, isn't there, that makes it part of them. Psychics are useful characters because they do give your protagonist the ability to process things. And when that psychic then turns into something quite adorable, whether it be because they don't speak the English language or because they have specific mannerisms, that seems to elevate it, doesn't it, to another level?
Yeah, it does. It definitely pushes into the territory of adorable. Like R2-D2 is another sidekick character a lot of people are very fond of, and he never appealed to me, I think because he was metal and beeped and hummed and whirred, so I wouldn't put him in the adorable category, but there's definitely a range of ways to appeal to people with these characters. And I wanted to ask, what do we do with the non-English speaking sidekick in text? Because we've been talking about movies. And your point, Robert, is a great one, that you can't really do intonation on the page. So then you're just relying on the context or the interpretation of the other character. Have either of you seen an example of this in print, or do you have ideas for how it could work?
I mean, I tried to do something similar in my Blood Empire series with Active, although she does speak Galactic. There are times where the reactions happen in the character which are different to a human reaction. And because she's alien, there's a bit of head swiveling and eye rotations and things that humans find hard to decode. So you can use other tics that you can describe as opposed to auditory, which is a little harder to describe, I think.
Right. Yeah, and I really liked that character. I thought you did a great job with that. Kind of the cross-cultural. And some of the prejudice in it. It's good when you have things like that. I think you can spin a bit more emotional reaction. And I like, you were one of the people who said, don't kill off actor. Right. Oh, okay. So, and other people said that as well. Okay, this is what a character that came out of nowhere. I just needed a foil at the time, and then as I went back and revised and brought her back into the main story, she ended up playing some key moments, and she will in book 2. There's no question about that. And you realise, oh, hang on, this is actually a character that people love to have in the scene, and I think that's what we talk about with these memorable or beloved or adorable characters. They're ones where either in a movie or you flip the page and all of a sudden you've got Groot back, or you've got Merry and Pippin, or you go, okay, cool. What are they going to do now? So it's really interesting that occurs. Yeah.
Do we plan it? Do we fall into it? How does that happen?
That's a good question. I fell into it with Skoghall, the ghost girl, Isabella. I meant to have a character Jess could talk to, a paranormal, a ghost character Jess could talk to, because with the murder victim ghost, there's all the sort of horror around it and the suspense around it. And I needed a way for Jess to sort of figure out her abilities and what was happening and how to use them. And so I invented this friendly child ghost in the antique store in Skoghall, and readers latched onto her. I'm like, okay. Yes. Bringing her back in book 2. Okay, there we go.
What about you, Kathryn? Have you stumbled into a character like that?
I don't know. It's kind of hard to know for your own work, and I haven't shared it widely enough for people to tell me. But I'm wondering if it doesn't have something to do with that kind of foil effect.
Yes.
Because like Merry and Pippin represent Frodo if he didn't have the ring, right? They're lighthearted, they're funny, they've got the comic drive behind them, but they are what Frodo would have been, right? And so you kind of get that mirroring effect, and like thinking of Neville Longbottom from Harry Potter, because he is who Harry maybe could have been if Harry had been raised in the wizarding world, because his parents were also Aurors or whatever. And so you get that kind of, he's a bumbling kind of fool, but he's also, in the end, he ends up saving, So, and so you kind of get that back and forth between the main protagonist and this side character. And I'm wondering if that effect isn't what kind of makes us latch onto them a little bit.
I think it's definitely to do with the relationship, because in both your book, Robert, and in my book, these, sidekick surprise characters are close to the protagonist. So they might not be intimately close, like best friend close or partner in arms close, but they play a big role in the protagonist's life, and there are a lot of exchanges there. And so maybe we do get some of that mirroring. Maybe, like in my case, you might get to see a different side of Jess, because Isabella the ghost is the only child in the first 2 books. So you see Jess relating to another character in a different way than she does anybody else, you know, so that might also have an endearing effect.
Mm-hmm.
And if your character is
definitely that,
yeah, if your character is nonverbal or a child or just otherwise outside the realm of what's normal for your protagonist, you're going to create a different sort of relationship.
I like what Kathryn said there as well about, you know, it's just something you don't necessarily know until you reflect it, or until somebody else reflects it, because we either inadvertently or unconsciously write theme, I think, you know, and it can get very heavy-handed actually if you do too consciously try to write theme into your story. Personally, I think that's something to just be careful about.
Right.
It's fine to have it in mind. You know, we've often talked about having the theme as a post-it note on your monitor. You know, I don't have any problem with that. It's just when you try to preach it through you know, exposition or dialogue, it gets heavy-handed. But inadvertently, it's part of our psyche that goes on the page. And so these fragments, as Kathryn said, you know, Merry and Pippin really are a fragment of Frodo. You know, Gollum is the other side if he completely went to the dark. You know, so you've got these other characters in there that, and Gollum is endearing in a different way. I mean, it's when the scene flicks to,
debatable.
Flicks to him, when the scene flicks to him, you're not going to go, oh God, you know this is going to be great. You know, oh dear. Oh, this is not going to end well, is it? You know, so they all flag something, I think. And as Kathryn said, it's a way of reflecting back to the main character things that they can't reflect for themselves. And so when we're writing, perhaps what's happening is that we're reflecting things that we don't really understand we're reflecting at the moment of writing, the moment of drafting. And that's why I think it's so vital to get other people's eyes on your work, because they may come back and say, you know, I really love that, you know, that little furry creature you brought in. It's just absolutely awesome.
Right.
And you go, oh, really? I just invented that because I just needed a way for, you know, my main character to get a weapon.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you've been given fodder, and it just came out of your psyche somewhere, but it's there, and once you have it, you can probably develop it quite easily because it's probably just a strand of your own persona somewhere.
Yeah, I love what you were saying about theme, Robert. You got me thinking about the Star Wars example with Chewbacca and Han Solo, you know, because Han Solo is a mercenary. He's just in it for the money. And right before the climax, he leaves Luke's side. He's like, you stay and fight, kid. I'm out of here. But then he does an about face and comes back and joins the epic battle in the climax. And if we didn't see him with Chewbacca, that true friend, that loyalty that he exhibits in the end might not be believable.
Wouldn't have made sense
in his character. Yeah, he would have just been the mercenary. But by having him and Chewbacca as a team and as a long-established pair, we know that he does have that loyal streak. He buries it, right? But it's there. It's in his core. And that's part of what makes him such a redeeming character and so likable, is because we know underneath all the tough exterior, he's a great guy.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I've enjoyed the Jack Reacher series in the past, but if you read some of the reviews of some of the latest books, people are getting a little tired of the, you know, vigilante comes into town, there's a problem, he kills all the bad guys and leaves. And if you think about it, there's if you've read the books, there's really he always picks up a sidekick somewhere in there, but they never stay. And yet the things that we're often drawn back to time and time again is because not just the main character, but because of those appearances of the likes of you know, Merry and Pippin or Groot or even Rocket in Guardians of the Galaxy. You know, that it's something to do with they're either wisecracking or they're emotional or they reflect something about the character and the relationships. And if they don't have that, then you just end up with a solo Jack Reacher kind of, you know, wading in and out of plots. So maybe it's actually essential that we find a way to develop our craft in, you know, I mean, I know we talk about three-dimensional side characters, and maybe this is a step beyond that. This is three-dimensional side characters that people attach to.
Right. But are they three-dimensional in the same way? You know, I was thinking as you're talking of Sherlock and Watson, but Watson is a fully developed three-dimensional character, but a character like the dog or the cat in a cozy mystery series, or Groot, is it the same category of sidekick? I'm wondering.
I don't think so. I don't think so, because I think we've talked about like Sherlock Holmes and Watson when we talked about arcless protagonists, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so Watson is arguably not a side character. And I think I was thinking about this too. This will surprise no one. I'm in the middle of Disney movie marathons with my 2-year-old, right? So I was watching Cinderella the other day, right? And I was like, with this in mind, as adorable characters, but I don't think the mice are adorable characters. They're not sidekicks. I think they're arguably semi-protagonists, because they're the ones that affect a lot of what happens in the story. So they're different kind
primary
of sidekick.
Supporting characters.
Yeah, they're a little bit different in terms of how you would view them. They aren't necessarily just that sidekick that makes everybody go, ooh, I want more. They're like actually affecting the plot. So there's, I think, 2 different levels of this. There's arguably the primary supporting character that is integral. And then there's the sidekick that just makes everybody kind of go, oh, I love them.
Yes, true.
Right.
You know?
And
true.
Don't you think those characters can evolve if we're talking about a series? Like if you look at Dobby the House Elf when he first appeared in the Harry Potter series versus, you know, his tragic death. His role got progressively bigger and deeper as the series went on. And I don't know if Rowling planned that from the beginning, if she saw how he would fit into those plots, or if she was getting reader feedback that said, we love Dobby, and was like, okay. Let's work that.
It seems as if the more we relate these examples, there's a theme of quirkiness that runs through there somewhere, isn't there?
Yes.
You know, I mean, even though Merry and Pippin were just hobbits, you know, their obsession with food and, you know, with you know, kind of outsmarting each other and being, you know, snark is probably the wrong word, but, you know, having the banter. Something that, you know, you always knew you were going to get. So I suppose there's that sort of reliability of something you always know you're going to get, and it's a little bit quirky.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because so many of these characters we've been talking about are non-human, or if they are human, or in that case, hobbit, there is that characteristic or set of characteristics that marks them as different and provides that comic relief, you know, or even if it's not comic as with Isabella, it is a sort of relief because it develops a subplot that kind of takes us away from all of the drama for a moment and lets us just engage with a little bit of fun, right? A little bit of curious.
Right, which makes me think that they maybe aren't as three-dimensional, right? Because you kind of have to lean into their more archetypical, maybe their more stereotypical things in order to convey that, and that is okay. Like, that's their job. Right? They have a singular focus rather than being a little more well-rounded.
Yeah, I think when I was talking about three-dimensional, what I was meaning is that they're not just a walk-on. You know, so an adorable character is probably not going to be just a walk-on. They have to interact. I think, as Alida said, they have to show that relationship, and in order to show a relationship, you have to have some dimensionality. So that's all I was meaning, really. When I was thinking back to cardboard cutout characters, you know, who just rock up and do the yes ma'am, no ma'am type thing,
right?
Just because it's convenient to the plot, which, you know, we all try and avoid, and maybe spot in our own revisions from time to time. Think, oh, that was really on the nose. I've got to change that one.
Right, and any cardboard character would get dull. So these these adorable sidekicks do need to be recurring, and they do need to have enough charisma, to keep the reader engaged long term, whatever that looks like, whether it's I Am Groot or
yeah.
Right.
I'm trying to think about human ones as well, and I mean I've seen a couple where they've been so latched onto by readers that they've ended up with their own series. So and you see that a fair bit. I mean, you see that obviously in TV because it's quite exploitative. They can't write any more stories around the main character, or the main character's done their total arc, they've got to go back to that world and pluck someone else out, and they look for people that the audience attached to.
Do you have an example in mind of one of those human characters?
Well, I've got in TV series, you've got Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Where Saul is I haven't seen any of the Better Call Saul, but I know the origin behind it. As an attorney that became popular in the series, so got his own. In Maggie Stiefvater's Raven Cycle, her new series is a spin-off with Ronan Lynch, who was a much loved character in the original series, and very quirky. And so she's really, really, really developed that, which is quite interesting because in the original series, his sexuality becomes clearer toward the end, and so in this new series, that's quite fully developed. So, she's also gone. She's allowed it to develop the characterization and his relationships, and it's interesting. So that's because I was just trying to think. All these examples we've had are actually all been either a slightly non-human or twisted version or fantasized version or a ghostly version. And maybe that's a little easier to understand when you're trying to think of something that comes to mind because we've got a visual anchor to them or an auditory anchor, whereas humans you tend not to think of. But yeah, those are the two I can think of immediately. What about you guys? And any thoughts about human adorable? Well, I suppose if we had Harry Potter, we've got Neville Longbottom, who's fun.
Yeah,
Luna Lovegood, who's quirky.
Luna's very quirky.
Yes.
She also matures over the series, though. When you meet her, just like Neville and even Dobby, she is so loopy. She is so far out there that you can't really take her seriously. She is just that type of a character. But then the more she engages with Harry, the more we get to know her as readers, the more we can believe some of the things she says, or at least respect her for saying them, even if it's still a little far-fetched, still a little out there. And so it's interesting to kind of compare that kind of character, the human character who can develop, who can become more, with the spin-offs, a star of their own show or series, versus a character like Dobby or Groot or Chewbacca, where would you go with that?
Right. I think that part of the charm of those characters that exist solely within the series, even if they develop, is that you do get the same feeling from them when they appear on the page.
Yes.
So even though Luna develops and you get to see her become part of the fight, like even at the end, she's always going to be Looney Luna, and you're going to get that kind of like, aw, she's so adorable in her own way. Or like Merry and Pippin when they show up with the Ents, right? And they're driving those Ents and they get all in there, and then, oh my gosh, there's Longbottom Leaf in the tower, right? So you return to that feeling of happy, hearty hobbits with their, so even they can have moments where they really do drive things, or they become, you see them developing, but then they're going to return to that feeling that you're expecting from that character, rather than spinning off and becoming the protagonist of their own story.
I think it's a great discussion. I think it's some of the best literature that I've read has been when you have those other characters, and especially if you've got multi POV, because you can get so disappointed if you're following the protagonist, and then all of a sudden you've got to wade through 3 other chapters of, side characters who still play an important part, but if they're quirky enough, you go, oh, cool, we're back to so-and-so,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. You have me thinking about all this talk about hobbits got me thinking about Sean Astin and his character in Stranger Things. And then, okay, spoiler alert, plug your ears if you haven't watched it yet. They kill him. And I was just thinking, like, can you kill these lovable characters? Can you kill these supporting characters that people just can't wait to see again? Because I was mad when they killed him. I saw it coming from a mile away. It was all set up. It was all there. And I was still mad. I was like, no, I like him.
Right?
Well, obviously you can. I mean,
yes. Yeah.
Look at Dobby. I mean, you and I would cry tears over Dobby. Maybe Kathryn's got different ideas. She was happy to see Dobby. Dobby leave
not a
leave
huge
the
Dobby
set.
fan.
Yeah, I'm not a Dobby fan either. Yeah,
Excellent.
you're like, oh, good, enough of that guy. But yes, no more socks.
I think
that's true.
what
If
they
you push
allow
the
you.
annoying characteristics too far. Yes.
Yeah. I think that what they allow you as a writer is the freedom to get that emotional impact of a death without having to kill your main characters or your primary supporting characters. Because if you can have that sidekick that everyone loves and you need that emotional impact where the stakes just get ratcheted way up and the reader goes, no, you can use that sidekick character to impact that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yes, you can kill them, but beware.
But beware.
It needs to be in
the
good
hate
service
mail
to
cometh.
your story. Right. Well, and like you said, it needs to make sense. It needs to be broadcast a million miles away, and you know it's coming, but you just regret that little heartache still. So.
And also, I think, it can be senseless. But I don't have a problem as long as it has to make sense that it could happen, but it could be senseless as long as it's there to provide some kind of impact on the protagonist and not just on the reader. So the impact should be on the story first. But our temptation, I think, is to write as a writer, say, "Oh, goody, I'm going to kill this one off in book 3." That's probably the wrong way to think about it. I know a lot of us would think that way, but realistically, you want to do it because of what it does to the reader and the story and the protagonist. Sorry, I mean what it does to the protagonist, and therefore, and that's why it makes sense. So even if it's senseless, it makes sense. So.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, and great words to end on because that applies to absolutely everything. It must serve your story first. Yeah, I said last words, but final thoughts. I'll see if we're really, truly ready to close it down.
That was well said.
All right. Thank you for listening to the Storyworks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.